Winter in Harlem, intro. It was the winter of 1952, and Harlem was locked in a deep freeze that seemed determined to test every soul who lived there. Cold winds tore through the streets, rattling old windows and slipping through cracks in brick buildings that had seen better days. On Sunday mornings, churchgoers wrapped themselves in layers, their breath floating in the air like pale clouds as they hurried inside for warmth. Along 125th Street, people walked with their heads down, collars pulled high, hands buried in pocket. Every step sent up a faint puff of steam from their mouth. The Hudson River nearby added to the chill, pushing sharp air through even the thickest coat. But high above the streets, in Sugar Hill, the world felt different. Inside a spacious apartment overlooking Edgecombe Avenue, warmth filled the rooms. Soft light reflected off polished wood floors. The air carried hints of beeswax, fine tobacco, and something gentler, new, clean, and unmistakably tied to infancy. This was the home of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. To the city, his name carried weight. People spoke it quietly, sometimes with fear, sometimes with admiration. He was known as a man who had survived situations that crushed others. He had faced powerful enemies, endured years of pressure from authorities, and walked away standing. At 47, Bumpy Johnson had seen more than most men ever would. The streets respected him. The neighborhood relied on him. And those who crossed him remembered it. Yet in this moment, standing alone in his study, none of that mattered. Part 2, A Father, Not a Legend. Bumpy stood by the tall window, hands behind his back, gazing out at Harlem as dusk settled in. Lights flickered on one by one, spreading across the neighborhood like scattered stars. From this height, the city looked peaceful, almost gentle. On his desk sat a silver-framed photograph. He turned from the window and picked it up. The photo showed his daughter, Elise. She was only 8 months old. Small, soft, perfect. Her eyes were wide and curious, as if the world was already asking her questions she had yet to answer. To Bumpy, Elise was more than a child. She was hope. She represented a future untouched by the harsh roads he had walked. When he held her, the noise of the city faded. The endless planning, the guarded conversations, the constant tension, all of it disappeared. With her, there was only quiet. Bumpy wanted everything for his daughter. Safety, comfort, opportunity. He wanted her to grow up without knowing hunger, fear, or cold nights. That dream was why he spared no expense. Why he chose the best home. Why he brought in the most highly recommended caretaker money could find. Miss Adelaide. Part 3, The Nanny. Miss Adelaide came with flawless references. She had worked for families with influence, bankers, politicians, people whose names opened doors. In a time when appearances mattered greatly, hiring a professional nanny like her sent a message. It said Elise Johnson would be raised with the same care and standards as any child born into elite society. Miss Adelaide was tall and straight-backed. Her uniform was always crisp, white, and spotless. Her hair was pulled tightly into a neat bun, not a strand out of place. She carried herself with precision and control, as if every movement had been practiced. She was efficient, quiet, professional. At least, that was how she appeared. Part 4, The Cry in the Night. That evening, Bumpy prepared to leave for a meeting. He adjusted his tie as he walked down the hallway, Persian rugs softening his footstep. Before heading out, he decided to check on Elise. The nursery door was closed. As he reached for the handle, a sound stopped him. Crying. Not the gentle fussing of a tired baby, but sharp, panicked crying. The kind that made the skin tighten and the heart react before the mind could catch up. Bumpy froze. He had heard this sound before over the past few weeks. Too often. His instincts stirred. He opened the door. The nursery was dim, lit only by a street lamp outside. Shadows stretched across the walls. Miss Adelaide stood by the crib with her back to him, her posture stiff. She turned quickly when she noticed him. For just a moment, something flashed across her face. Surprise, maybe irritation. Then it was gone, replaced by a practiced smile. "Mr. Johnson," she whispered, pressing a finger to her lips. "I just settled her. She's been difficult tonight." The crying softened, but didn't fully stop. It came in shaky breaths from the crib. Bumpy stepped closer. "She sounds frightened," he said quietly. He leaned over the crib. Part 5. A Father's Instinct. Elise lay on her back, her tiny hands gripping the blanket tightly. Her face was flushed, eyes wide. When she saw her father, she didn't smile. She stiffened. It was subtle, but unmistakable. She pulled slightly away. Bumpy's chest tightened. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered gently. "Papa's here." Elise stared at him, breathing unevenly, her eyes flicking between her father and Miss Adelaide behind him. "She has colic," Miss Adelaide said smoothly. "A sensitive child. I've explained this to Mrs. Johnson." Bumpy brushed Elise's cheek. Her skin felt cool. Then his fingers touched her hair. It was damp. He checked her collar. The fabric was wet. "Why is she like this?" he asked calmly. Miss Adelaide responded quickly. "She cries until she perspires. Quite common." Bumpy rubbed the moisture between his fingers. Something felt wrong. His instincts, honed by decades of survival, quietly told him this wasn't normal. Part 6. Silent Doubt. Bumpy lifted Elise gently into his arms. Almost instantly, her breathing slowed. She rested her head against his chest. The crying stopped. Bumpy looked at Miss Adelaide. "She settles fast with me," he said. "Yes," Adelaide replied. "She responds to strong presence." That answer sat poorly with him. After a long pause, he nodded. "I'll stay with her a while." Miss Adelaide stepped back, her expression unreadable. Bumpy stood there, holding his daughter, feeling her heartbeat steady beneath his palm. And in that quiet moment, a thought settled deep in his mind. Something wasn't right. Part 7. Foreshadowing ending. That night, Bumpy Johnson did not go to his meeting. He stayed home, watching, listening. For the first time in weeks, Elise slept peacefully. And for the first time, Bumpy began to question the people he had trusted most with his child. It smelled like plain tap water, maybe with a faint hint of chemicals, the kind used in city pipe. Bumpy's jaw tightened. "Change her," he said, calm but firm. "I don't want her sleeping in wet clothes." "I was about to," Adelaide replied quickly, stepping closer, so close her body naturally blocked the crib, gently pushing him back without touching him. "But it would be best if you leave now, sir. Your presence excites her. She needs a neutral environment to learn how to settle herself." Bumpy stared at her. Then she added, like she was reading from a rulebook, "If you pick her up every time she cries, she won't learn discipline." Bumpy's eyes narrowed. "She's a baby," he said, his voice dropping lower, heavier. "She doesn't need discipline. She needs comfort." Adelaide didn't blink. "Discipline is comfort, Mr. Johnson," she said evenly. "Structure is safety." She glanced at the clock like she was annoyed time was being wasted. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a schedule to keep." Bumpy stood there for a moment, holding back the part of himself that wanted to explode. On the streets, nobody talked to him like that. Not twice. But this wasn't the street. This was his home. His daughter. His wife's trust. And this woman had credentials people respected. So he swallowed it. He leaned toward the crib one last time and spoke softly. "Good night, Elise." Then he turned and walked out. When the door clicked shut behind him, a cold discomfort settled in his stomach. Not fear, something else. A warning. Colic, he thought. Sweat. None of it felt right. Bumpy Johnson had built his entire life on reading people. He could hear a lie hiding inside a sentence. He could spot hesitation before a man even knew he was hesitating. And Miss Adelaide? She was holding something back. The next 3 days crawled by. Bumpy started making excuses to come home early. He cut meetings short. He canceled plans without explanation. He told people he had family matters, and left it at that. More than once, he found himself standing in the hallway outside the nursery door, listening like a stranger in his own home. And a pattern became impossible to ignore. In the mornings, when Elise's mother was around, Adelaide acted like the perfect caretaker. She sang sweet nursery songs in a clear voice. She pushed the stroller through the neighborhood like she was showing off a prize. She smiled at neighbors and nodded politely. She folded clothes with sharp creases. Everything looked calm and proper. But late afternoon was different. Every day, around 4 p.m., the apartment's mood changed. Elise would begin to cry. At first it would be small, an uneasy whimper. Then it would build, faster and faster, until it became panicked and non-stop. And it didn't sound like a baby who was fussy. It sounded like a baby who was scared. Bumpy and his wife. On Tuesday evening, Bumpy sat in the living room with his wife. The radio played soft jazz, but Bumpy couldn't focus on any of it. All he could hear were the muffled cries coming from the back rooms. Each sound tightened something in his chest. He lowered his newspaper slowly. "That doesn't sound right," he said. "That doesn't sound like a stomach problem." His wife looked up from her knitting. She looked exhausted, dark shadows under her eyes, shoulders tense like she hadn't fully relaxed in weeks. "Adelaide says it's a difficult hour," she answered quietly. "She says some babies struggle when the day shifts into night. She calls it a phase." Bumpy's face hardened. "She keeps saying we can't interfere," his wife continued. "She says if we step in, Elise won't get used to her." Bumpy snapped before he could stop himself. "I don't care about Elise getting used to the nanny. I care that my daughter sounds like she's in real distress." His wife hesitated, then said softly, "I took her to Dr. Williams yesterday." Bumpy froze. "You did? Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to worry you unless it was serious," she said, setting down her knitting. The doctor checked her carefully. "No fever. No rash. Nothing obvious. He said she seems healthy." Bumpy shook his head slowly, like he couldn't accept the words. "And he agreed with Adelaide?" She nodded. "He said it could just be temperament." Bumpy repeated the word like he hated how it tasted. Temperament. He paced to the window and stared out at the city lights. "She was smiling 2 months ago," he said. "She was laughing. Now she looks at me like I'm a stranger. She tenses up. She pulls away." He turned back. "Have you seen that?" Tears filled his wife's eyes. "I have," she whispered. "And it breaks my heart." She wiped her face quickly. "But Adelaide says it's because we're anxious. She says babies feel stress in the house. With the police watching, with all the pressure around us, maybe Elise feels it too." That answer hit Bumpy in the worst place. Because deep down, that was his greatest fear, that his life, his problems, his enemies were leaking into his daughter's world. But he couldn't shake the other memory. The damp hair. The cold skin. The look in Adelaide's eyes when she thought nobody was watching. Bumpy turned back to his wife. "Or maybe," he said quietly, "it's something else." The day he came home early. The decision came 2 days later. Thursday afternoon, around 2 p.m., Bumpy came home without warning. He let himself in quietly. His wife was out at a charity lunch. The cook moved around the kitchen, doing her work like usual, keeping her head down. Bumpy didn't announce himself. He removed his shoes and walked down the hall in his socks. Silent. Focused. When he reached the nursery door, it was closed. And then he heard a voice from inside. It wasn't Adelaide's sweet, professional voice. It was lower. Harder. Cold. Bumpy stopped breathing for a second. He listened. He heard Adelaide speaking in short, angry bursts, words no caregiver should be saying to an infant. Not gentle. Not patient. Not kind. Then he heard running water. A sudden splash. And then Elise made a sound, sharp, strained, like she was struggling to catch her breath. Bumpy's body tensed instantly. His hand moved to the doorknob, then stopped. Because he knew something. If he burst in too early and Adelaide had an excuse ready, she'd turn it around on him. She'd say he was paranoid, overreacting, being the gangster everyone already thought he was. She could go to the agency. She could go to the people who recommended her. She could go to his wife. And the worst part? There might be nothing obvious to prove what was happening. No clear signs. No proof. Bumpy stepped back from the door, shaking with controlled anger. He didn't want suspicion anymore. He wanted certainty. A quiet plan. Bumpy walked back to his study and picked up the phone. He called a trusted man, someone who handled delicate problems and kept his mouth shut. A man who understood that some things mattered more than business. When the man arrived, he didn't come through the front door. He used the service elevator like a shadow. They spoke quietly. Bumpy didn't waste time. "I need to know what happens in that room when the door is closed," Bumpy said. "I need to hear it clearly. I need proof." The man's face tightened. Even in Bumpy's world, there were lines people didn't cross. Anything involving a child wasn't just wrong, it was unforgivable. "I understand," the man said. And he got to work. Fast, careful, leaving no obvious trace of anything unusual in the home. What mattered to Bumpy wasn't technology. What mattered was truth. By mid-afternoon, the setup was done, hidden in plain sight, blended into the normal objects in the room. No drama. No mess. Just a silent witness. Before the man left, he looked Bumpy in the eye and said something simple. "If you hear something bad, you move. Immediately." Bumpy nodded. "Go," he said. "Now." The man disappeared the way he came. Waiting. Bumpy sat alone in his study. A thin line ran from the wall like a reminder of what he was about to learn. He stared at it, feeling sick. Because even though he believed his instincts, he still hoped he was wrong. He hoped all of this would end with nothing. A strict nanny. A baby having a phase. A father overthinking. But Bumpy Johnson didn't build his life by ignoring warning signs. At exactly 4 p.m., the front door opened. He heard the stroller wheels. He heard Adelaide's steady footstep. He heard Elisa's small baby sounds, and then a tiny whimper as she was lifted. Bumpy sat still and listened. Adelaide's voice carried down the hall, pleasant on the surface. "Home again," she said. "And now it's time for your rest." Then her tone shifted slightly, sharper. "And there will be no trouble today. Do you understand? No trouble." Bumpy put on the listening set in his study. The sound came through clearly. He could hear fabric moving. The crib's small creak. Adelaide's breathing, heavy and impatient. Then Adelaide spoke again. And without her nice voice, without her polite smile, she sounded like a completely different person. Cold. Strict. Like she was talking to someone she didn't respect. "We are going to behave," she said. "We are going to be quiet." He heard her footsteps leave the room. She went somewhere else. Water ran again. Bumpy's heart beat faster. Then she returned. The nursery door clicked shut. And the crying started immediately, like Elise understood what the closed door meant. The cry didn't build slowly. It exploded. Fast. Panicked. Breathless. Adelaide snapped. "Stop." Elise cried harder. "Stop that noise." The crying turned into full panic, terrified and non-stop. Then Adelaide hissed, her voice low and ugly. "You're being bad again." Bumpy's hands tightened around the armrest. His breathing changed. He listened as the situation escalated, Elise gasping between cries, Adelaide's voice getting harsher, more impatient, more cruel. And Bumpy realized something clearly. This wasn't colic. This wasn't temperament. This was something Elise had learned to fear. Because the moment that door closed, she reacted like she expected something awful. Bumpy pressed the headphones tighter. His jaw was clenched. And in that moment, he wasn't thinking like a boss or a legend. He was thinking like a father who was done pretending. "You want to scream? You want to make noise?" Bumpy heard Adelaide's voice shift, low and harsh, nothing like the polished tone she used when others were present. Then he heard movement. Quick, impatient. Water running. A splash. Adelaide's whisper cut through the sound. "We have to clean you," she said. "We have to wash the noise away." A second later, Elise's crying changed. Not louder, different. Strained. Panicked. Like her little body was fighting for calm and couldn't find it. Bumpy's heart slammed. He didn't wait for another sound. He tore the headphones off, stood so fast the chair scraped hard against the floor, and stormed out of the study. His mind stopped strategizing. The careful thinker vanished. There was only one thing left in him now. A father. He rushed down the hallway, not caring about rugs or furniture or noise. He reached the nursery door and didn't even touch the handle. He forced it open. The door flew wide, hitting the wall with a crack that shook the room. Inside, the lights were low and the curtains were drawn. Adelaide was near the crib, startled like she'd been caught doing something she couldn't explain. Bumpy didn't waste a second looking around. His eyes went straight to Elise. She was distressed and damp, her breathing uneven, her little body trembling as if she'd been overwhelmed and frightened. Bumpy scooped her up instantly. The moment she was in his arms, her whole body clung to him like she'd been waiting for safety. Adelaide spun toward him, her face stiff with panic. "Mr. Johnson, this is a misunderstanding," she said quickly. She was overheated. "I was trying to calm her down." Bumpy held Elise close, shielding her against his chest. Then he turned his head slowly and looked at Adelaide with a stare so cold it barely looked human. "Calm her down," he said quietly. Adelaide swallowed. "There are methods," she insisted, her voice shaky now. "European methods. For children with difficult temperaments." Bumpy took one step closer, still holding Elise. "You locked the door," he said. "You spoke to her like she was an enemy. And the moment I listened, she reacted like she knew what was coming." Adelaide's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Bumpy's voice stayed low, controlled, terrifyingly steady. "Look at the radio," he said. Adelaide glanced toward the corner. It looked ordinary, just furniture. But Bumpy didn't blink. "It isn't ordinary," he said. "And it's not your word against mine." Adelaide's face drained of color. Bumpy didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I heard you," he said. "I heard the way you talked to her when you thought no one was there." Adelaide's shoulders sagged. Her authority collapsed in real time. Then she said something that made Bumpy's stomach turn, not because it was shocking, but because it was small and selfish. "She cries too much," Adelaide muttered, trembling. "It gets in my head." I needed her to stop. Bumpy stared at her. He felt the rage rising like fire. But Elise was in his arms, terrified, shaking, holding onto him like her life depended on it. Bumpy understood something in that moment. If he exploded here, if he became a storm in front of his daughter, he would teach her a new kind of fear. So he chose control. He backed toward the hall, still holding Elise tight. "You're staying right there," he said. "You don't move. You don't touch anything. And you don't go near a window." Adelaide shook her head quickly, tears spilling now. "I'll leave," she begged. "I'll disappear, please." Bumpy cut her off with a single look. He stepped out, pulled the door closed, and locked it from the outside with a key he kept on him. Then he stood in the hallway, breathing hard, holding his baby as she cried into his shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered, kissing her damp hair. "Papa's got you. You're safe." But his mind was already racing. Because now he had a different problem. He had proof of something serious. He had a caretaker locked in the nursery. And he was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. If he called the police, they wouldn't just come for Adelaide. They'd come for him. They'd tear through his home, search every room, turn his life upside down. And worst of all, they might try to take Elise. So Bumpy knew he needed a smarter kind of justice. A cleaner kind. One that protected his daughter first. His wife comes home. Bumpy walked to the kitchen. And right then, the back door opened. His wife stepped in, shaking rain from her umbrella, ready to smile and ask how his day went. But the smile vanished the second she saw his face. Then she saw Elise in his arms, soaked, upset, clinging to him. and she saw something in Bumpy's eyes that she hadn't seen in years. "Ellsworth," she whispered, dropping the umbrella. "What happened? Is she sick?" Bumpy swallowed. His voice cracked, not from fear, but from the effort of holding himself together. "She's not sick," he said. He walked forward and placed Elise carefully into his wife's arms. "Take her," he said gently. "Dry her. Hold her close." His wife looked down at Elise, then back at him, alarm rising. "Why is she wet?" she demanded. Bumpy's jaw tightened. "The nanny," he said. "Adelaide." His wife went still. "What about her?" Bumpy met her eyes. He knew this would shatter something inside her: trust, pride, comfort. But he also knew it would ignite something stronger. "She wasn't soothing her," he said. "She was doing things that terrified her, things meant to force silence." For a moment the room felt frozen. Then his wife's face changed. The soft social smile disappeared. In its place came something older, pure instinct. "Where is she?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "Locked in the nursery," Bumpy answered. The cook had appeared at the doorway, eyes wide, hands hovering like she didn't know whether to pray or run. Bumpy's wife turned sharply. "Take Elise to my room," she ordered. "Lock the door. Turn the radio on. Stay there until I come." The cook didn't argue. She hurried away. Now it was just Bumpy and his wife. She smoothed her skirt with slow, controlled hands, like she was calming herself before stepping into danger. "Unlock the nursery," she said. Bumpy hesitated. "We have to be careful," he warned. "If we do this wrong." His wife turned to him, her voice calm but burning underneath. "I am being careful," she said. "You can't touch her. Not you. Not in your position. They would use it against you." She walked past him toward the hallway. "But I'm her mother," she said quietly. "And nobody tells a mother how to protect her child." Bumpy followed, key heavy in his hand. He realized something with grim clarity. Adelaide was about to learn that the gangster wasn't the scariest person in the house. The mother was. The confrontation, safe version. His wife stopped at the nursery door. The hallway was silent except for distant radio music from the bedroom where Elise was being held. She inserted the key. Click. The door opened. Inside, the room smelled of spilled water and panic. Adelaide stood near the window, hands clasped like she was rehearsing innocence. The moment she saw Mrs. Johnson, she straightened and tried to rebuild her dignity. "Mrs. Johnson," Adelaide began, forcing her voice steady. "There's been a misunderstanding." Mr. Johnson came in, agitated. He misread a standard calming method. Mrs. Johnson didn't rush in. She walked slowly, heels tapping softly on wood. She looked at the mess on the floor. She looked at the empty crib. Then she looked straight at Adelaide. "A method," she repeated, her voice quiet. Adelaide nodded quickly, clinging to the word like a lifeline. "Yes. A recognized approach. Used by professionals." The child was hysterical. "I was trying to help her regulate." Mrs. Johnson took a step closer. "You think I'm foolish," she said softly. "You think because I host dinners and wear nice clothes, I don't recognize cruelty when I see it." Adelaide tried to speak again. Mrs. Johnson didn't raise her hand. She didn't create a scene. She did something worse for Adelaide. She took control. "My husband has proof," she said, calm as ice. "And your story won't survive it." Adelaide's face tightened. "What proof?" Mrs. Johnson's gaze didn't move. "You weren't careful," she said. "You thought no one would ever know what you did behind a closed door." Adelaide swallowed hard. Mrs. Johnson leaned in slightly, voice still low. "You're leaving this home," she said. "And you're leaving in a way that makes sure you never go near another child again." Adelaide's lips trembled. "You can't." Mrs. Johnson cut her off. "In this house," she said, "you don't make rules. You don't decide what's best. And you don't get to rewrite what happened." Bumpy stood behind his wife, a silent wall, making it very clear. There would be no escape through him. Not tonight. We have photographs, Mrs. Johnson said, her voice steady and cold. And we have audio. Clear enough to show exactly what you said, and what you were doing. Adelaide froze. Her eyes flicked past Mrs. Johnson to Bumpy, standing quietly in the doorway. He didn't shout. He didn't move. But the stillness in him felt heavier than any threat. Adelaide's confidence collapsed. I didn't mean, she sobbed. She wouldn't stop crying. The sound it gets inside my head. I just wanted peace. I just wanted it quiet. Mrs. Johnson's expression didn't soften. You had a reputation, she corrected. Now you have nothing. She reached up and pulled the blinds shut, sealing the nursery from the outside world. The room became even smaller, even quieter, like a courtroom. Get up, she ordered. Adelaide stood unsteadily, her uniform rumpled, her hands shaking. Mrs. Johnson didn't scream. She didn't perform. She spoke like someone reading a verdict. For 3 weeks, she said, pacing slowly, you looked me in the eye and told me I was too soft. You told me I was the problem. You told me my own child's fear was a phase. She stopped in front of Adelaide. And I listened. Her voice cracked once, just once, then hardened again. I watched my baby change. I watched her flinch. I watched her startle. And you kept saying it was normal. Adelaide tried to speak, but Mrs. Johnson cut her off with a single raised finger. No. Not now. She turned to Bumpy. The photos, she said. Bumpy stepped forward and placed a stack of prints into his wife's hands. Mrs. Johnson flipped through them one by one. Her face didn't change much, but her eyes did. With each picture, something in her gaze sharpened. She tossed the photos into Adelaide's lap. Look, she said. Adelaide looked down at the images and began to cry harder, covering her face. I'm sick, Adelaide whispered. I need help. Bumpy finally spoke from the doorway, his voice low and blunt. This is who you are when you think no one is watching. Mrs. Johnson inhaled slowly. She knew they couldn't handle this the way angry people might in a moment of panic. Not in their position. Not in that era. Not with everything already watching them. And she also knew they couldn't simply fire Adelaide and let her walk out with a clean story. If Adelaide left freely, she could twist the truth into a headline. And in 1952, the world would be eager to believe the worst version of Bumpy Johnson. So Mrs. Johnson chose something smarter. Something that would end Adelaide's power permanently. She went to the writing desk, picked up pen and paper, and placed them in front of Adelaide. You're going to write a statement, she said. In your own words. You're going to admit what you did, and you're going to admit you were not fit to be in charge of a child. Adelaide shook her head quickly. I can't write that, she pleaded. I'll be ruined. I'll never work again. Mrs. Johnson didn't blink. That is the point. Adelaide's breathing turned fast and shallow. I won't do it, she whispered. Bumpy stepped closer, not rushing, not dramatic. Just enough to remind Adelaide she wasn't in control. You can write it,